Hello and welcome back to the On the Ball podcast. Now, as you can probably tell, this is not your usual host, Hamish McCorkadale. He is off busy with exams, so is Christian Pilcher. So I'm going to be taking it solo today. I'm going to be talking about the round 14 review as well as the round 15 preview. We're also going to have a bit of an AFL draft segment in there. I'm a bit of an off-season nuffy myself. I cop a lot of stick for it, but at the end of the day, it's just one of those weird little things I love to enjoy about the AFL. It's just awesome to see players being potentially put into new jumpers and all that. So we're going to touch on that for a bit, but let's quickly dive into the round 14 review. At the time of recording, this is the Thursday night. Currently, Brisbane and Geelong are playing. I've actually got that on right next to me, so every now and then I'm going to have a very, very quick glance at the score. At the moment, at the time of recording, it is 31-1. Brisbane's favourite quarter time. So it's been a huge game so far for the Lions. Lachie Neale has hurt his shoulder slightly, but I guess when you're hearing this, you'll know exactly how that's played out for him. So round 14, we're not going to talk about it too much. There was only about 5 games played, but we'll quickly recap it off with the game of the round. Geelong Bulldogs, this had all the hype going into it, and it certainly delivered. We obviously all know about the Gary Rowan kick after the siren. This game was a huge test for the Dogs going to GMHBA. It's probably the most demanding task for any team in the competition, going down there and playing the Cats at the Cattery. Just about no team gets it done, and unfortunately the Dogs joined that list of teams. They were seconds or just even a kick away from sealing that victory, but of course the man Gary Rowan put it through. I was actually at a bar in Brighton, and a few boys next to us on another table, one of them had $5,000 on the Cats to win in head-to-head. So strange bet, that one, but it obviously paid off. So they were one of the winners of the week for me, the Cats. I'm not going to put the Dogs in as a loser. It was a very hard-fought match by them. Their stars, Bontempelli, McRae, obviously stood up for them, had huge games in the midfield, and it was a bit gutting to not see them get up because for most of the match, they were the better team. Josh Bruce was having one of his best games for the Dogs. Aaron Norton was also a good target up forward until he got hurt. But yeah, it was overall a huge game to watch and probably one of the games of the year, if not the game of the year. So that was an unbelievable one. The next one of the day after was Gold Coast Port. This didn't quite have the same atmosphere, I guess. It was obviously just Port's straight from the get-go. Apart from the first goal kicked by the Suns, Port just completely ran away with it. Charlie Dixon was huge up forward for them. But overall, it was the big man, Willem Drew, the Hamish McCorkadale host lookalike, that took it away in the midfield for them. He's keeping Tom Rockcliffe out of the side at the moment. But 27 touches and 7 tackles alongside Ollie Wines, who had a phenomenal 43 touches, basically all uncontested, had 6 tackles and 8 marks as well. So it was a huge game for Port, just to rack up a few stats, really. They also had the emergence of Miles Bergman off halfback. So for those super coach punters out there, kind of took Lachie Jones's role. So it was great to see a local boy in Miles Bergman get a big opportunity for them down back. It was a huge game for myself. Managed to put a 3-leg same-go multi on for Connor Rosey to kick 3 is the big risky one, and he obviously did it. So it was nice to pocket a bit of cash there. I am going to put Gold Coast as a big loser out of that game, more so than Port Adelaide winning for obvious reasons. This time it was at Gold Coast home ground, so there was always the potential for Gold Coast to turn up. However, they didn't. Ben King, their spearhead in attack was kept to, well, I say 2 goals. It was more so the 3 touches that highlighted his impact on the game. It just, apart from Took Miller in the midfield, who stood out with 31, and Jack Lacoches and Will Powell were very good off halfback, there was just no real standouts for them at all. So it's just the continuous Gold Coast display where they have a lot of sort of 10 to 20 touch players that don't have an overall impact on the game. It's much like St Kilda. So, yeah, it was just another disappointing performance for them, and we're going to talk about how they could potentially improve with that in our middle of the episode segment. So going on to the next game on that day, it was, of course, North Melbourne-Brisbane, the blockbuster game. No, I'm just kidding. But, yeah, I guess we all sort of went into this hoping that North Melbourne could replicate its performance from the previous week. Obviously, drew with GWS in what was probably the match of the round, surprisingly. But North Melbourne were always in it. It was kind of helped by a bit of wet weather footy in the second half. A lot of contested. It was a bit of a scrappy game, but overall the Lions were just too good, obviously. North were very, very lucky to stay in it. The Lions obviously were their inaccurate selves with 14 behinds. But yeah, at the end of the day, Lions were just too good. Obviously killed him in the middle. Jared Lyons and Lachie Neale obviously had 66 combined. Zach Bailey was another standout for the Lions there, just continuing on his awesome form. He's just going on to show the competition that he is the real deal. He's going to be one of the most exciting players to watch over the years to come. He had 29 disposals, and I can't recall him ever getting that many. So that's probably a career high for him. Also kicked a goal. Hugh McCluggage as well with 31. He just continues to solidify his authority as the number one pick in his draft alongside the likes of Taranto and fellow midfielders. So that was a bit of a scrappy game. Not much more to be said there. Can't really call North Melbourne a loser out of that one or the Lions a winner. So just a scrappy game leading up until GWS and Carlton. Carlton's woes just continue. I think over the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks, we've all expected Carlton to get this one hard-fought victory, no more honourable losses, and, no, in true Carlton fashion, all their fans would start cancelling their September holidays. But it's just still not coming. It's just another not even honourable loss this time. This was just a gutting loss. It was a match that was well within their grasp in terms of matchups. But unfortunately, just once again, the Giants is too good for Carlton. Obviously, De Boer went straight to Sam Walsh. I think many saw that coming. I certainly did. He was going to come into my Supercoach team, but because of that reason, I went and paid up for Jared Lyons, who I was very happy with. Obviously, De Boer went straight to Walsh, and it just sort of set the tone from there. No one really from Carlton got going in the match. I think Matt Kennedy was probably one of the only glowing lights for them in this game. He had 27 coming back into the side, also 8 marks and 4 tackles. So it was a solid game for him, but apart from that, it was all GWS. They obviously let Toby Green just get off their handle with 4 goals and 20 touches. Was a bit dodgy here and there, a few tripping attempts and all that. It was interesting to see him after the game say that he's not going to change the way he plays. We all have your own opinions on Toby Green. I personally love him, but obviously to see these sort of acts is probably not in the spirit of the game. It is always awesome to have a bit of a competitive edge, but at the end of the day, you don't want players sort of trying to, in Toby's case, not get free kicks, but you don't want to see him injuring players and, affecting the result of the game in that sense. Another one that got off the handle for GWS was Jeremy Finlayson, who only 13 touches, but within those 13, he had 10 marks and 5 goals. So he's just one of those players that always gets away from Carlton. They always seem to let their forward lines, especially the likes of Toby Green, one of those sort of medium-sized forwards, kick a bag. So that was always coming. But Finlayson, the Giants have been looking for a bit of a tall forward avenue to goal. It looked like they'd been missing Jeremy Cameron for a little bit the last few weeks. I think I touched upon that an episode or 2 ago, but Finlayson just stood up exactly where he needed to. He must have heard my criticisms, probably an avid listener to On The Ball podcast. He was huge for them. Josh Kelly, rolled ankle. We all obviously want to see him out there playing and doing his best footy. So I think it isn't serious. He's playing again this week. So love to see him out there. I'm Isaac coming all over the place when I saw that he was named this week. So that's obviously very good for him. So another good win for the Giants. They managed to just stay within grasp of that top 8. But I think it's getting to the pointy end of the season where it's just every game that goes on is just falling a little bit more away from their grasp. I think the lowest ranked team, that is Richmond and Sydney and all them, but we just can't see Richmond falling out of the 8. It's just not going to happen. The Eagles, the other team that's in that bottom 3 with those other 2 teams I just mentioned. But it's just hard to really see those teams fall out of the top 8, especially with the Giants draw the other week. So it was obviously a good win for the Giants. Another reason to not write them off, at least for the next few years. This one was certainly a loss to Carlton, if we're going to classify that. It was just one they they needed to win given everything that's going on, especially with the review that's going to be happening. And David Teague's, we don't know whether he's going to be there next year. And Paddy Cripps, I think that deal's just about solidified, but he still hasn't signed. And by the looks of how their list is going, they're going to have to lose one big fish. They got to free up some money. So with the likes of McGovern, who's somehow on sort of upward of 600, 700K, and Zach Williams, don't know about that. I'd love to see this sort of output per dollar that's being paid for him, because I'm not sure it probably stacks up against the likes of the top end players in the competition. I'd love to see a comparison between Brody Myercheck and him, for example. Myercheck, obviously, I think he's off the rookie contract now. But, just talking about output per dollar paid, don't know about that one there. So Walsh is going to have to sign, and I think he will. He's a type of loyal lad to, well, not that I know him personally, but he seems like the type of lad who would stick to the team that drafts him. He's just one of those dream boys that gets drafted, that just sticks to the club, does everything you want them to. Future captain, obviously. I think he's going to be staying. So, honestly, you throw up the likes of, is it going to be Harry Mackay? Obviously, probably not. Like, who is it going to be? We don't know. I think the likes of, Petrevsky, Seaton, Zach Fisher, and all those sort of WA boys that are, I think Zach Fisher's obviously good enough to be in that team. Petrevsky, Seaton, we don't know, shows a lot of potential. I think Carlton fans are crying out for him to be playing. But, it's just whether it's going to come from one player, all this money that they need to free up, or just maybe a couple of mid-paid players. That's going to be very interesting to see in this and the next off-season. The following day, we just had the one game, but it was a very close one in Hawthorn-Essendon. The Bombers just ran away with it in the last quarter with a 13-point margin. Once again, not going to really name any winners or losers here. I guess the Bombers, it was good for them to beat another team that was sort of compared to them prior to the 2021 season. So in that respect, very solid win for them. And one of the glowing lights, not just of this game, but of the whole round, was the performance of Jake Stringer. Obviously, much to my sort of disappointment, it wasn't Kyle Langford that really got to go in that midfield. Not that he deserves to, because my God, I don't think I've ever picked a worse 470k player in my Supercoach team. He got a mediocre 70, but blimey, that man knows how to butcher a footy. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. But Jake Stringer had 29 rolling through that midfield, had 7 tackles, 4 goals, and just a lazy 180 ranking or Supercoach points. So just absolutely showcase the sheer potential the sheer potential he has. We obviously did the redraft of his draft in 2012, a few episodes back, and we all found it a bit hard to position him. So I think a few of us sort of went sort of 5, 6, and I can't remember who it was. I think someone didn't even include him in there. So not that I blame them. It's very hard to to redraft him. Knowing Stringer, he's probably going to do a foot or something next week, and he's going to be out for another 3 to 4. But it was awesome to see him rolling through that midfield and having the impact that we all know he's capable of. Another one that stood out for the Bombers was Nick Hind. Again, much to my... Well, I've sort of got mixed feelings about this. So he had 25, 1 goal, and probably about 50 running bounces. He's exactly the type of player we need, and we got rid of him for pick 70, which I think we passed on. So, fantastic list management there, St Kilda. But yeah, at the end of the day, it is awesome to see Nick Hind playing to the best of his ability. He was obviously drafted as a running halfback. Stupidly, we played him as a half forward, hence why we moved him on, because we needed to get rid of either him or Jack Loney. Ended up being Hind, and now they're playing him in the correct position. Doesn't take a genius to figure that out, but clearly St Kilda is not full of geniuses. So, yeah, it was awesome to see Hind up and running about, because I always liked him as a player. Good old Fromby, but unfortunately, we just didn't think that he would be any good of halfback, but he clearly is. So to have 25 of halfback is unbelievable, given the amount of impact he has with every disposal. It's just about 50 metres gained just with his legs, and then he obviously disposed of the footy and another 50, so that's awesome for him. The return of Sam Draper as well was awesome for the Bombers. Obviously going to be, or probably be their next ruckman for the years to come. So that is the review of round 14. Can you believe we're already 14 rounds into the season? It honestly flies by. Round 1 and 2 did not seem that long ago at all. But anyway, so they've got about 9 rounds left until the finals, which is obviously the best time of the season. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's sort of sad to realize that we're already 14 rounds in, but at the moment, 15 rounds in now. So, quick score update as well. Not that anyone's really going to care because you're all going to know the final result. But at the moment, it's 38-20 in the second quarter. So the Cats have kicked a few in this quarter to sort of claw their way back. No pun intended. But Isaac Smith's just kicked one there. So score update for absolutely no one because everyone's obviously knows the final score by now. So we are actually going to touch on a little segment that I have come up with. I figured it's probably the best week to do this given no one else really has this obsession with the off-season as much as I do. It's one of my little things I just love. So I am going to skip the top 8 prediction because it just seems to be the same teams in a different order every single week. So I'm just going to take a week off that bit. We'll get back to that when we have the other guests on the podcast. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to spend maybe 1 or 2 minutes a bit on each team, just talking about maybe what they need in terms of where their list is at and what they're aiming to achieve over the coming years. And I might just sort of throw in a few names here and there on who they could target. Some of them have been raised as off-field targets. Some of them just haven't even been mentioned before. So, for those listening, don't go and, if I say one name that no one's talked about, don't go and send it to your known journalist and tell them to publish a story and tell them that I said this is going to happen because I'm just going to throw these names out there for the sake of variety. So we're going to start off with, we're just going to go in alphabetical order. We're going to start off with the Adelaide Crows. So as we know, going into this season, the Crows, we knew they were going to be sort of bottom of the table, and they have surprised. They are not bottom 4, believe it or not. 14 rounds into the season, they're not bottom 4. They are actually sitting in 12th, above my Saints, who were touted to be top 4. So that's very nice. They are also above the likes of Carlton and Collingwood, who would have surprised many in the off season. So they have exceeded expectations. I saw a few comments in the preseason. There is a draftee called Jason Horn, who is a South Australian blonde-haired midfielder, goal-kicking midfielder, who is touted to be top 5. Actually touted to be top 2 at some point. So him and Dacos have been talked about a lot for that number 1 position. And lots of sort of Adelaide fans talking about, we need to take this season just so we can get Horn across. You can imagine what his nickname is. They've actually exceeded expectations. May mean they don't get that sort of top 3 or 4 picks. So at the moment, I think they're actually sitting at pick 7. So really, for the Adelaide Crows at the moment, it's just about getting young talent in. It's as simple as that. So preferably South Australian based, so no one really wants to leave. But they can really just cover all ends of the park with this one. So, they've got obviously the emergence of Jordan Butts down back. They've tried and tested Nick Murray at times. We don't really know where he's at. Daniel Taylor is obviously nearing the end of his career. They moved on Kyle Hardigan in the off-season, so a tall defender would be nice. One name that is South Australian and has popped up in recent years is Brennan Cox. Bit of a swing man, so we don't really know where his best foot is at yet, but at the end of the day, Adelaide do also probably need some support up forward for Thilthorpe, and we don't really know where Fogarty's at or Elliot Himmelberg. So Cox, bring him in. You can try and test him at both ends of the ground. Hopefully he nails one. Should do because he is an immense talent. So that's just one name I'll throw out there. Jake Riccardi as well. I'm probably going to talk about him a few times this podcast, or at least this segment, sorry. Given we all saw what he could do last season, and he's absolutely killing it in the seconds, just still can't get a game. So he's one that I'd keep an eye on this off-season because it's clear that he's got the capability to kick bags as a forward. He has also been tried and tested as a sort of a half-back. So a bit of a versatile swingman there as well. So he's another one that I'm going to throw out there. Dylan Stevens as well is a South Australian drafted a couple of years ago. Just can't quite break into that Swans lineup. A few of the young midfielders have kind of overtaken him, the likes of Chad Warner. I think he was in that same draft. Errol Goulden and stuff as well. So Stevens, don't know how he's going to quite fit into that Swans lineup unless he obviously lifts his form. Obviously, being South Australian, could be a perfect play for the Crows to target. Okay, so on to the Lions. They are in the premiership window, as we can obviously tell. I've picked them to come at the top of the table last week after talking about whether they'll even make finals earlier in the season. But they are in the premiership window, and I think it is going to obviously be for a few years. They're elite players, the likes of McCluggage and Jared Berry, Harris Andrews. Lockie Neal and Jared Lyons aren't even old as well. So they're going to be in there for a while. So it's just really about attracting elite talent, whether it's, mid to late 20s, could even get some experience in there as well, similar to what they did with Luke Hodge. So, yeah, it's just going after a premiership. They may need, I'm going to throw this name in there again, Brennan Cox. So they obviously have the likes of Harris Andrews down back. They've got Darcy Gardner who's on the sidelines at the moment. They've got Marcus Adams who's in there. We don't really, I think he's having a pretty okay season for them. Bit of a Lockie Henderson type season when, you just completely come out of nowhere as a bit of a mature age body. But we don't really know where he's at. That forward line as well, McStay, Hitwood and Danaher is working nicely. So don't really need any forward targets for now. Just hope that they can take the game to another level. Midfield's fine. So it's really just about solidifying that back line, I think. So Brennan Cox, another one, if you want to try and test him down there. That's all I'd say, really. Maybe just the likes of, if you can pry someone like a Harrison Petty, who's sort of up and coming, young, but obviously he's proven himself to be a pretty good lockdown defender. Just someone like that. Don't hold me to that. He's a South Australian boy, so maybe he's another one the Crows, as we mentioned before, could target. But yeah, it's just really about attracting players who are about to enter their prime or in their prime now, the Lions, or go for experience. So, they can still roll with drafting the couple of kids every draft. But I think, the last sort of 7 or 8 years, they've gone heavy at the draft, the Lions, and they have had obviously a fair few hits. But they also have had a few misses. But I think their hits, they've had enough to build their list, as we've seen. I think in the year with Harris Andrews, I looked the other day, they had about 6 or 7 blokes they took in that draft, and I think Andrews is the only one left. So just goes to show you can just pick up blokes that can be all-Australian players in the 60s. So maybe that's what they should roll with the Lions. Maybe pick up a few mature ages here and there that can have an immediate impact. Might help with their premiership window. So that's the Lions done. Now, Carlton is a big one. So as we've seen over the last sort of few years, they have had a lot of misses. They've obviously nailed one with Sam Walsh, obviously going to be a future captain. But at the end of the day, they just need help probably a little bit all over the park. So I think the midfield we saw on the weekend, I think one of the centre bouncers, Walsh, was in there by himself, just occupied by De Boer. Cripps was absolutely gassed, and their third midfielder was Paddy Dow. No further explanation needed. So I think they do need a bit of help in that midfield. Obviously, Matt Kennedy somehow isn't getting a run in there, really, and you can't keep throwing Paddy Dow in those centre bounces. So one they should probably go after is Adam Chera. He's probably going to be the biggest talked about name, or at least he is so far this off-season. Obviously a Freo boy, but he was drafted out of Vic Metro, and as we've seen in previous years, Vic Metro are the type of players to feel a bit more at home in Victoria. They're usually urban, brought up in urban areas. So they are sort of city boys, around the likes. They are sort of very brought up in these areas around the city. So it was always going to be one of those names that are talked about. To will he come home after a few years? Obviously, sign an extension, but it is going to be a very interesting case with Adam Chera. He's obviously a very talented midfielder, very smooth mover, picked up as pick 5 in that national draft, and he was one that I really wanted at Saints at pick 7 or 8. Unfortunately, he didn't slip through, but he is an immense talent. He is one that could help them out there. Obviously, roughly same age bracket as Sam Walsh and a few of the others down there, so would be huge for them. Or another one they could go after is Josh Kelly. Obviously going to be another huge name that's going to be talked about this off-season, and he has been in previous years. He is obviously a huge talent, worthy of big numbers on a contract, does have those injury issues, but when he plays in the midfield, he's one of the best in the competition. We all know that. So when he doesn't have Leon Cameron as coach, may well be a Brownlow contender. So I'm going to throw out a third midfielder in here as well, one that has been raised in the past few weeks. You've got Tom Mitchell, hasn't been linked to Carlton, and we are talking about how Carlton are going to have these money issues. But at the end of the day, you can't have like a McGovern sitting on 700k and just doing what he's doing. So whether you ship off someone to get in someone in that midfield that really needs help, I'm sure that issue is going to be raised. But someone like a Tom Mitchell to get in there, maybe take the load off Patrick Cripps. Obviously, we all know about his body, but someone like a Mitchell to get in there and give the hands out to Walsh and Cripps, who can obviously get it forward. That would be huge for them. And also maybe some help up forward as well, especially with the smaller guys, sorry. So maybe a few blokes like Lockie Schutz or Collier from Fremantle. They've got a few of those type of mid to small forwards. I think Carlton just need a bit of energy, obviously, down forward, because they are going to be saying goodbye to Eddie Betts, as is the whole AFL world. It's going to be a sad day when that happens, but they are going to need a replacement. They've seen the emergence of Matthew Owies. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but we're going to roll with it. So we've seen the emergence of Matt Owies this year. He's obviously been a nice target for them, but someone with a bit more zip, maybe putting a bit more pressure on those defenders would be very handy for them. Right, so on to Collingwood. Look, it's just about draftees, really. I think with this list that they've obviously got a lot of experienced guys down there, like to Steel Sidebottom and Pendlebury and all them. But unfortunately, they're not going to be taking them to the next premiership unless something dramatic happens next year. So it's just about their next list and which list is going to take them to that premiership. So they're obviously going to be getting Nick Dacos at the end of this season. He's going to be huge for them. He'll be playing round one. He's just absolutely dominating it in I think it's the Oakley Chargers he's playing for. Could be wrong there, but they have had a few people mention that he's having a bigger season than Rowey, bigger season than Walsh. And this is scary because every year we seem to be having an up-and-coming midfielder that's having just a bigger impact than the previous one. So these players are getting scary good. So it's going to be awesome to see how he's going to go, but it's just a matter of whether they can get a few more players other than just Nick Cox. You obviously don't want to throw all your eggs into one basket with your draftees. Unfortunately, Collingwood's list management in the past few years hasn't been great. We're going to leave it at that. So they did have to ship off, obviously, Treloar and Stephenson. I think Phillips left for more so just getting a bit more of a friendly role, really. But they did have to ship off those two, and by the sounds of it, it's not over yet. And they've still managed to only end up with picks sort of 30 and 40 and 50 in this draft. So how they've done that, I'm not quite sure. It is quite astounding. But as we've said before, you can pick up the likes of Harris Andrews in the big 60s. So at the end of the day, I think it's just about getting a few kids in, a few mature ages as well. We've seen Bowie McCreary be drafted, and he's actually, up there in the tackles and inside forward 50 this year. So he's obviously been huge for them, probably going to be playing a massive part in that lineup in the years to come. But yeah, it's whether they can maybe trade up, get a couple of earlier picks, and see what they can do. But yeah, they've obviously got a talented list at the moment, but we've seen that it's just not going to take them to the next premiership, unfortunately. So it's a matter of hoping that the likes of these sort of middle-aged players like Braden Maynard, for example, and just stay and can hopefully provide a nice benchmark for the youngsters that are going to be coming in. So on to Essendon. They are pretty well set off around the ground. So in the midfield, they have bolstered that with Jai Caldwell in the offseason. Obviously injured for most of this year, but he is an absolute talent, and he'll be playing in that midfield in the years to come. And the emergence of Darcy Parish really has been absolutely awesome for them. Obviously solidified himself as just a Brownlow contender this year. So he's going to be in there in the years to come. Zach Merritt's just re-signed, which is huge news for the Bombers. Likes of Andy McGrath going through there. We've just seen what Jake Stringer can do. And Kyle Langford, he's been the whipping boy of Essendon in the past few years, and he's been my whipping boy for about a week now. So we've seen what he could do in the last few weeks before. Coincidentally, I brought him into my Supercoach team. So they've got, just the likes of throwing Devon Smith and stuff in there. They're very fine in that midfield indeed. Down back, they've got the likes of Ridley, who obviously had a stellar year last year, just getting more games into Zerk Thatcher. They're pretty well off down there. Maybe could use one or two more, given the likes, Hurley's obviously going into retirement soon, and the likes of, Gleeson and Ambrose, they sort of guys that they once had a hope for aren't really getting games now, and their career is looking more and more certain. But also, a forward target is probably what they need as well. So the like of Hooker is going to be nearing the end of his career. They've obviously got Harrison Jones down there, who had a stellar game on the weekend against the Hawks. Got the Rising Star nomination and well deserved, but maybe a bit of experience down there. So I'm just going to throw this name in there again. It obviously just contradicts what I said about experience, but Jake Riccardi is one that could bolster that forward line. So him and Harrison Jones could provide a very nice forward partnership in the years to come. They've also obviously got Peter Wright in there, but what happens with him, don't really know. Could provide a nice little trio attack with a Wright, a Riccardi, and a Jones. Wright obviously switching with Draper when needed, and then the likes of Stringer and can keep Langford on the wing. Just keep him around the ball, please, for the sake of my Supercoach team. But, has Stringer down there as another target. Hopefully get him to attract a bit of a lesser experienced defender. Have him play a few more of these breaker games. That will be elite for the Bombers. But yeah, at the moment, as far as it goes, I think their midfield's pretty much set, and that's a very good place to start when doing your rebuild. So on to Fremantle. Just a bit of WA talent is needed there, really. So the moment their midfield is obviously good. They're getting games into the likes of Sarong. I think he's attended the most centre bounces for them this season, which is huge for a player in his third year. But maybe just one more that can roll through there, take a bit of pressure off his shoulders, so he can maybe go down forward when he needs to. Maybe the likes of a Jack Ross from Richmond, or as we've talked about, haven't talked about, but the AFL world has, Quinton Nykel, who just can't get a game for Geelong somehow. Any other team he would be, but someone like him, who's obviously a WA boy that can roll through that midfield and just a bit of a bigger body and with a bit of pace as well. He'd be awesome for them in there. Would love to see him getting some games just anywhere, really, because there's no better player. There's few better players I actually like to watch when they're fit and firing than Quinton Nykel. He's obviously not had many opportunities at it, but when he has, blimey, he's set the world on fire. And then a Jordan Clark as well, coming off halfback, would be very handy for them. Obviously, another WA Geelong boy that can't get a game for the Cats, and maybe they can swing a bit of a package deal there, Freo, and see what they can do there. But just a bit of WA talent to continue this nice rebuild. I know a few people sort of expected Freo to be within finals contention this year. I wasn't as optimistic. I still thought they were a few years off, and looks like that estimation is sort of, come to fruition. It doesn't look like they'll be making it this year. They have provided a nice push. They are in 11th. I think they were 10th maybe a week or two ago. But just a bit of WA talent to continue this nice rebuild. And then Geelong as well. Look, they arguably got the best list on paper in the competition, Geelong, and they just really need to win a premiership with it. I think this year's it's going to be their best chance every year from here on in. Their likelihood is just going to go down and down as these players get older and older. It's going to hit them hard, Geelong, in a few years. They really need to sort of get some reward for what they've done. So maybe at the moment, Geelong, all they're going to be focusing on this year is sort of the next 10 to 12 weeks and September and what they can do. But maybe in the off-season, just get a few more kids in, just so this sort of blow that's going to happen in a few years isn't as dramatic as it's going to seem. As Ruckman as well is obviously a big issue for them. Not a big issue, but they never really seem to have a set one. Sean Darcy was one that the Cats were obviously going to go after, but he's just re-signed. I think it was today. He's obviously a huge player for Freo, so very glad he's sticking there. Just a bit of ruck support for the Cats is really what's needed. Apart from that, not too much else. It's just about winning a premiership with the current list that they've got. And then Gold Coast, well, it's come to the point where they've got enough talent. They've actually sort of proven that point today by saying that their first pick's going to be on the table to get some experience into their team, preferably a forward. So they've sort of just answered the Gold Coast segment of the Gold Coast section of this segment with that one. So whether they need another extra tall defender to help out Sam Collins and whoever the hell's down there, I don't think Lukosius isn't really a lockdown. They've got the likes of Chris Burgess and all that, but yeah, just someone to help out down there. They've only got a few games into the likes of Caleb Graham and, all these type of blokes. Can't even think off the top of my head, but just a bit of tall timber is really needed. The Gold Coast Suns, a bit of support for Ben King too is needed. So just someone the likes of Callum Coleman Jones, would be huge for them. up forward to give Benny King a bit of assistance, but also to swing it into the ruck to help out Jared Witts. Imagine a Jared Witts, a 208 centimetre forward target. Would love to see what would happen there, but they are fine for talent now. They can't really keep on going to the draft, the Suns, because they're just going to keep on getting kids in that are going to develop, and they're going to have great careers down the road. But some leave, some stay. The ones that stay, some develop, some don't, and the ones that develop, well, it's hard to get your career to exactly where it needs to be an elite player if you don't have experience around you, because it's hard to get leadership, because you can only get so much leadership from your coach and coaches. At the end of the day, me as just a cricketer, I've found that the most sort of coaching and mentoring I get is actually when I'm playing the game, rather than sitting down being told what to do. So at the end of the day, I think they just need to bring in some experience from other clubs, whether that's the likes of a Mitch Wallace, who just can't get a game at the Dogs, but obviously I think their vice captain would be huge for them, or a Seb Ross from the Saints. Bit of help in that midfield as well. Not that they probably need it, but more so for that experience. Just sort of helping mentoring the likes of Matty Rowell and Noah Anderson and all that. Obviously, Took Miller was born and bred in Gold Coast now. Not born, sorry, but drafted and obviously progressed his career at Gold Coast. So he's never really had any sort of strong mentors, apart from probably Gary Ablett, that he's played with. So just the likes of Seb Ross could come in and teach him a few things about what to do. Probably not how to kick, because I just don't know how Seb Ross continues to at least be highlighted as a very, very good player, given how horrendous his ball use is by foot. But yeah, just a bit of experience needed for Gold Coast, really. They can't keep resorting to the draft, because it's just not really getting them anywhere. I know it takes time for these players to develop, and these players are still developing, but they now have enough. They have their foundation of youngsters to take them to that next level. They need a bit of experience, and then hopefully they're going to start winning these games, especially outside of Metricon, where they do tend to struggle. But enough on them. So now on to GWS. It's more just about trying to keep their players. They've got a very strong list on paper, the Giants, and a few of their kids that they are blooding this year, or not blooding, but just getting more games into it, coming on really well. Specifically in their defence, the likes of Connor Iden, Jack Buckley, Lockie Ash, Isaac Cumming, these guys are all becoming regulars in the team now. It's becoming really promising for them. Obviously, no one's requested a trade yet. Good signs for the Giants so far this season. But yeah, it's just about keeping their players, keeping Josh Kelly. He's going to be huge for them, and just another extra tall defender, obviously with Phil Davis nearing the end of his career. Sam Taylor's obviously been a huge underrated player for them in his career so far, but has been injured for a lot of this year, has exposed them a little bit. They have had to use, obviously, the kids that they're bringing up, the Jack Buckleys and the Idens, but just someone with a bit more experience, maybe someone like a Zane Cordy. I know, obviously, just pry someone away from a team's best 22 like a Zane. So just to give a bit more experience down there, obviously when Phil Davis leaves, and they're just getting a few more games into the likes of Iden and Jack Buckley and whatnot. So that would be huge for the Giants. But yeah, it's just more about keeping these players and just solidifying this team, because I don't want to write off the Giants. I'm not going to. I refuse to with the current list that they've got. It's ridiculous how much talent they've got on that list, and the fact that they're sitting in, they were sitting a lot lower than that earlier in the year, and everyone was saying Leon Cameron's gone, but they have risen right back up, and just proving everyone that they still have the talent, and they are still going to be a top 8 chance next year. In fact, I've probably got them in my predictions for next year. Don't know who the hell I would take out. And probably no one at this point. But yeah, at the moment, look, GWS, they've got all the talent in the world. They've got abundance of top 10, top 20 draft picks. So, and they've just gotten a few more in the likes of Tanner Bruin and them. So at the end of the day, definitely not writing them off. It's just about keeping their players and just growing a bit more culture. Yeah, so in a sense, GWS is a little bit irrelevant in this section about what they need in the offseason. All they need is just a bit of cohesion, just to go away and get some team building exercises done. Build a bit of life, build a heart, just to hopefully keep the list intact. So on to Hawthorn. If you're Alistair Clarkson, turn this off, because I'm going to talk about. I'm going to mention one word that you don't want to hear: kids. And just like that, the police department just entered my house to come and arrest me. But so it's just about getting the kids in really to Well, just because they need more. They can't obviously go on to their next premiership list with the experienced guys that they've got. Obviously, the likes of Bruce and all them are coming to the twilight of their careers. They're not going to be in their next in their next premiership window. It's likes of Chad Wingard and all this and that. Bit confused by these sort of trade-ins. They obviously were going on a bit of a downward spell since that sort of dynasty. And yeah, to get these guys in, Omir as well, who are all searching for success, obviously hasn't gone that way. And because of that, I don't hate the idea of trading out a Tom Mitchell for a top draft pick. So maybe something like that for the Hawks, maybe just getting a few kids in that haven't really gotten a game at other clubs, but we're pretty highly touted as juniors. A few Port Adelaide boys, Dylan Williams, who actually is making his debut this week for Port Adelaide, so good luck to him. But he was very highly touted as a junior, ended up being drafted, I think, in the 30s, if I'm not mistaken. But coming into his draft year, he was actually talked about as the top 10. So someone like him can maybe bring out the best of his ability. Also, a Sam Hayes was, he was in Phantom drafts in the top 10, very strongly linked to Collingwood in his draft year, ends up going in the 40s, given that, everyone sort of realised that you don't really need to pick a ruckman as a top 5, top 6 pick. So he ended up sliding all the way to pick in the 40s and continues to be the unluckiest man in the AFL. He's always in the mix section of Port Adelaide. He's always, I swear, half the week is always predicted to come into the lineup. Never even hear about him at 6:20 on a Thursday night when the team's released. But fingers crossed he gets his chance soon. But, maybe it's at another club like a Hawthorn where they just need to bring in kids through the draft, but also from other clubs where they maybe haven't had a chance to get to reach their full potential yet, or just even get an opportunity. So that would be very solid for them. Please don't report this episode just for, saying the word kids, because that is what Hawthorn need. And yeah, sorry, Alistair Clark, you can tune back in now. So on to Melbourne. What they probably need is just, they've been the surprise packet of the competition this year. They're pretty well set in terms of midfield, obviously. The emergence of Jimmy Jordan has been huge for them. So he's really just removed that part of what Melbourne might have needed this for this offseason. Obviously don't need any more midfielders. Their defence has obviously been proven to be one of the hardest to crack, especially with the likes of May and Lever down there. Harrison Petty also coming on very nicely, who, definitely didn't float him as a trade target for Adelaide and Brisbane earlier. But just a little partnership with Cozzy Pickett up forward is what they could do with he's obviously a one-man mosquito fleet down there. Charlie Spargo's coming on nicely, but tends to play a bit more up the ground, if I'm not mistaken. So, imagine the likes of Cozzy Pickett and Isaac Rankin in the same forward line. That would just... I would be so close to becoming a Melbourne supporter. Not that I ever will ditch my own team, but would be so close to just watching them every single week if you had a forward line of Cozzy Pickett and Isaac Rankin. The tall forward line, it's a bit of a weird one with Ben Brown and Sam Wiedemann. Neither of them are in their best 22. Both of them are fit. They are top of the ladder, Melbourne. So imagine if you said that at the start of the year. But they're obviously coming on very nice with Bailey Fritsch, obviously probably having a career best year. Tom McDonald down there is obviously being very serviceable for them. And then the likes of, when Jackson and Gawn both interchange down there, obviously give them a goal or two every game, which is very handy for them. But yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one where the careers of Sam Wiedemann and Ben Brown are heading, especially with Ben Brown, who just moved to the D's this year, is fit but can't get a game. So maybe just a bit of a partnership down there with Cozzy Pickett as another electrifying small forward. I know Isaac's obviously a South Australian boy, and his name's probably going to come up in the years to come for that exact reason. But just imagine a forward line of Cozzy Pickett and Isaac Rankin. That would be immense. But obviously on to North Melbourne. Once again, it's just getting a bunch of kids in, draftees, just rebuilding this team because whilst they aren't many touted them to be the worst team the competition's ever seen this season. They are currently sitting on 6 points with a percentage of 61. So obviously it's not really a season that Kangaroo fans are going to want to remember, but it hasn't obviously been disastrous. They've had a few surprises. The likes of Nick Larkey is just continuing to come on as just a solid tall forward, but he probably does need a bit of support down there. So maybe I'm just going to mention this name again. Jake Riccardi is one that they're probably going to go after. I think they'll have heard this one actually floating around the realms of Twitter. But he's definitely one that could fit in well to form a nice partnership in the years to come. And Nick Larkey and Jake Riccardi, that flows nicely off the tongue. Could definitely see that happening. They obviously have been linked to Jack Billings as well. He's a very, very close friend of Luke McDonald. So whether that happens or not, I don't know. In terms of a St Kilda point of view, it depends what pick would get us. But with all the kids coming in, a Jack Billings would be nice to sort of give them a bit of mentorship. Obviously, he's not a veteran, but someone that's been in the competition now for about 8 years, was obviously a pick 3, so knows how it all goes as a top draftee in the AFL. Would be very handy for them. Just continue their rebuild. Once again, someone like a Sam Hayes from Port Adelaide would be handy, given not sure where their rucks are at in the current point in time. Obviously, Goldie is going to be entering the twilight of his career. They just drafted Jacob Edwards out of the mid-season draft, another local boy. Maybe a partnership of him and Sam Hayes in the future, you never know. So just a few kids there to bring in North Melbourne. It's really that simple. On to Port Adelaide. Look, they've got a very good team at the moment. They've got a very nice balance of youngsters and veterans in there. So just to give a bit of support in that midfield, given the likes of, Boak and Wines are going to be entering, more so Boak. The man's, he's not an unfamiliar man in the squad of 30s of the world now. So just a bit of support in that midfield, maybe. Obviously, the likes of Will and Drew is coming on very nicely. But, maybe just another high-body midfielder, maybe not so much like an Ollie Wines, maybe someone that can use the ball nicely off the boot. I know Ollie Wines got about 150 fantasy, but only 100 Supercoach on the weekend. So a very Tim Taranto performance from him. Someone that can use it nicely, but there's also a hard body in there. Someone like, the likes of Jack Graham, Jack Ross from the Tigers, maybe. Not saying they're elite kicks, but just, a bit of pace in there, just a bit of toughness, just so that when Boak does depart, they do have players to just rotate straight into there. They obviously do the likes of, Butters and all these guys, but, obviously not tough bodies. They do have a few of them, the likes of Rockcliffe, who just can't get a game. Sam Powell-Pepper, Rockcliffe does have just about every injury under the sun at the moment, but, Powell-Pepper, don't really know where he's at with his career at the moment, but, just someone to rotate through there when those guys get a bit tired. Boak usually misses a few games now. Just do a bit of soreness just to rest him every now and then. But I think two of the main targets they're going to be going after the next few years are Lukosius and Rankin. Obviously, South Australian boys. I think they went on record to say that we're going to be coming for them in a few years when they got drafted, which was a very interesting play by them. Even if they could just land one, that'd be awesome for them. Just to have a Lukosius running off halfback or a Rankin in that forward line would actually obviously be huge. Obviously, Port have rotated with a few of their small forwards this year and previous years. Fantasia can only get on the park once in a blue moon, and Boyd, Horsecock, Woodcock, and obviously new to the competition. So he's coming on all right, but obviously can't cement his spot really. So just the likes of those guys. Robbie Gray's obviously entering the end of his career as well. Those two would be handy. They've probably got those two names at the top of their whiteboards in their recruiting department. So no real news-breaking stories there, but two that they're definitely going to be targeting. It'd be very interesting to see if they could land one, maybe even both. Richmond, I talked about this today, actually. I drove all the way back home from Warrnambool today with my girlfriend, who's a Richmond supporter. So had a long time to talk about various topics. One of them was Richmond, and I was asking her what she reckons I should talk about in this segment for them. We came to the conclusion that with their list at the moment, they've obviously had their dynasty. They've, obviously been one of the best sides the competition's ever seen in the last sort of 4 or 5 seasons. So whether they don't win another premiership or do, at the end of the day, their list has been a success over the last few years. It's been huge. Lots of those players have won 3 premierships now. So it's really been just a period of time to remember for Tigers fans. So whether they're obviously going to be pushing for, again, this year, probably next year as well. In Ray Walt's probably last year. So it's just the likes of, that this year has been very tough for them. They've obviously had a lot of injuries that have depleted that midfield. Apart from that, though, both ends of the ground, they've been pretty well off. So maybe just 1 or 2 more midfielders to come into that team, just so you don't have the likes, relying on the likes of Collie Dawkins to have, a 10, 15 plus centre bounces, in like his first season. Not that I would at the moment anyway. His disposal use isn't fantastic, but They do obviously have the likes of these blokes in the wings, the Jack Rosses and Jack Graham. Jack Graham is obviously a very handy player and in their best 22, but just the likes of, him. They've got a few kids that they've tried and tested, like Will Martin and all that. They've haven't come on as well as maybe they could have at another club. So maybe just a bit more of a tried and, known to perform well at AFL ability type of midfielder, someone that won't probably cost them too much. Maybe like a Sam Powell-Pepper, for example, to come in, provide a bit of ferocity in there. He's very much the type of player that would probably suit Richmond, just that more sort of get the ball down to that forward line, use your pace, use your strength. It's not so much about skill and pinpoint hitting targets. Just get the ball forward. That's exactly how Richmond play. So maybe someone like him would be absolutely perfect for them. But also try and get kids in, because when these players enter the twilight of their careers, they are going to be a bit worse off. They are going to be, they are going to be hit pretty hard, because all these players are roughly same age bracket. So when they all, like the Cotchins and the Rewalds and all these guys in a few years sort of hit the end of their careers, they are going to be left with a few holes in their list. So maybe just bring in someone like a Sam Powell-Pepper, just so this sort of midfield disaster doesn't happen again. Or if it does, they've got a few more cogs in the wheel they can use. But just apart from that, it's just about getting kids in, really, to stem the flow of the just the blow that's going to probably occur in the next few years. But apart from that, obviously you're smooth sailing as a Richmond supporter. I'm very envious of you guys. But a couple of players that have been linked to Richmond actually is Adam Cerra and Tom Mitchell. Not sure if either of them really fit demographics there. Obviously, Cerra has been talked about recently, but he'll be entering his prime in a couple of years. But that's probably just in time for when Richmond might be entering their stint in the bottom 10 for, I don't know how long it'll be, whether they even do or not. Odds are they will probably need a few years to sort of do a little tiny mini rebuild. But whether you bring in an Adam Cerra, I'm not too sure. Will obviously be a very good player for them if he did. But, he wouldn't come in and he wouldn't be like the talking point every week, or he wouldn't be in really any of the talking points for Richmond. Given the likes of, they've got the Dusties of the world and they've got all these star players. I have a feeling Cerra, not sure he'd be attending every centre bounce, might just be another sort of playoff halfback. Maybe, if Batcher Hooley calls it quits at the end of the season, could sort of play off halfback for a bit. But I just have a feeling Cerra might be better off going to a team like Carlton, where he really can play his role, move into that full-time midfield role, and solidify himself as one of the smooth movers of the competition in those midfielders, as a midfielder, sorry. And then Tom Mitchell, not sure he fits the way Richmond plays, a high possession, low meters gain midfielder. That's obviously exactly him. Richmond do tend to lose the disposal counts most weeks, or at least their players don't amass high numbers, given the fact that it's all just get the ball forward, use their intense ferocity and pressure to do that. So not sure how Tom Mitchell would fit in with that. I'm not sure if either of those trade targets would be suitable for Richmond and their demographics, but will be very interesting to see who they go after. And then on to my St Kilda lineup. I obviously blabber on about them every week, so I'll definitely try and keep this section short. I think the number one thing at the moment, look, I'm not even going to try and, I talked about our list a few weeks ago. It's a disaster. I don't think this list, if it continues to go on the way it does, and our players don't develop into these A+ grade players, which is what we were kind of relying on, I don't think it's going to get us to another premiership. I think it's worse than we all think. I think it's going to be another sort of long, drawn-out, confused rebuild, given the fact that we've got all these guys that we drafted, some of them as sort of top 10 picks, but they're just not delivering. They're not going to that extra level. So, number one thing I think we need, our biggest weapon, St Kilda, is our ability to use Ron Marshall and Paddy Ryder as our sort of ruck forward combo. They probably are, this is not a Cooper Gretsch moment, they probably are the best ruck forward combo when fit in the competition. And given Ryder's obviously very old, probably this or next year will be his last, just someone to replace him. So Marshall is in that sort of ruck forward combo. Marshall is the guy that plays sort of 60% forward, 40% ruck, whereas Ryder's the opposite. He'll play a bit more of the ruck. So just a bit of a ruckman that can swing forward is probably what we need. That's why I really liked he hadn't been even talked about with St Kilda. Like maybe a Sean Darcy would have been perfect, but obviously he's just re-signed. One that I would love to bring in is a Matthew Flynn. We've obviously seen how good he can be in the ruck at GWS when Mumford wasn't playing at the start of the year, especially against us. Had a 140 Supercoach game in his debut. I think it was absolutely phenomenal. But since Mumford's come in, he's been a bit more ruck and forward, and he's been a very good target for them up forward. He's got some very good hands on him and can kick the footy sometimes sideways. But he would be one that I would be targeting if I was Saints, because he's probably going to be there. He's there aiming to be their number one ruck for the next few years. Given Mumford's obviously, we don't know how long he's got left, but given he's already retired once, but we'll see what happens there. But yeah, if I had the chance, Saints, I'd be trying to go after Matthew Flynn just so that we can continue to have this ruck forward combination, because look, it's the only weapon we've really got at the moment. So you may as well try and replace with what we can when one of them goes down. And then just the likes of maybe look, I raised this question to Mitch Cleary on Trade Radio, I think last season, about we need like a smooth moving midfielder. We've got the likes of Zach Jones and Jack Steele and Brad. Well, we hadn't got Brad Crouch at that point, but we were going to. But Seb Ross and all these guys that just can't kick the footy. So we needed a smooth mover in there, someone with a bit of composure. I raised the question of Josh Kelly, who had been linked to for years and years and years. He said, no, it's probably going to come from a guy like Hunter Clark. I tended to agree. But like we've seen, we haven't really seen these guys sort of come on. So I'm just going to throw his name out there again, Josh Kelly. Obviously, the salary cap is getting to the point where it is starting to fill up a bit. It doesn't help that you've got Dan Hanbury, who's on a lot of money. His big bucks were earned at the start of his contract, which I don't think many people understand. He's not on as much now, but he's still on a fair bit of coin. So to free up someone like him at the end of the season, maybe like a Seb Ross as well, who just, look, to be honest, I don't think he's not going to be in our best. He's not going to be our Premiership 22 if we ever flipping win one. Maybe moving on a few of these boys just to free up a bit of cash. Someone that's a little bit younger, a bit more of a different midfielder to what we've got at the moment. Someone like a Josh Kelly, playing full-time mid would be perfect. But yeah, just someone like a Matt Flynn, give a bit of support to Maxi King down there. Look, the back line, I don't even know what's going on there. Like, Dougal Howard's come on very nicely. But apart from that, don't really know what's going on. It's different every week. Callum Wilkie, is another one that's been very solid for us. But, Caulfield was very good last season. Looks just lost this year. Ben Long, don't know how he even plays defense. Don't even know how he sets foot on the park, Ben Long, let alone play in defense. Probably the most important part of the ground. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'd love to see us go after Matt Flynn. That'd be awesome to continue this two-pronged ruck forward attack. It's obviously our biggest attack. The biggest sort of weapon at the moment. Would be huge if we could get him across and down to St Kilda. On to Sydney, just about getting more kids in. They've obviously brought in a few guys that have been really good. They've got a very good success rate, the Swans, with drafting players and turning them into solid best 22 players. So they've obviously brought in Errol Gould and Braden Campbell this season. Chad Warner's come on as well and just almost appears like many would probably think he was drafted last season. Which, it was the year before with Dylan Stevens, who is one that hasn't really come on, that we talked about that could be floated as a potential Adelaide go-home boy. But yeah, it's just more about getting the kids in. They're obviously going in. They're in a very nice spot, the Swans. They are in the top 8. They are at 6, actually, at the moment. So if they want to continue this sort of push to play finals, just a few more guys that are going to be entering their primes. They really want to make a strong push. But yeah, apart from that, it's just about getting kids in who are very talented, just to maybe just make a bit of a, just sort of set the foundation for the Swans for the next sort of 10 to 15 years. So that's probably a stretch. Maybe sort of 10 years to really be a very strong team in the competition, much like Geelong have done the last sort of 10, 15 years. They barely ever miss finals. So just, yeah, a few more kids like that and just some guys that are sort of entering their prime so they can push to those finals. Maybe a bit of experience in there as well. They've obviously got the likes of Josh Kennedy and Luke Parker in that midfield, but maybe at either end of the ground. Buddy, don't know how long he's got left. But yeah, someone to support Logan McDonald, but as well as that defence, someone to support Tom McCartan. So maybe just, the likes of Jake Riccardi to support Logan McDonald. Obviously he's an experience, but would be handy in the future. At this point in time, seems like he's going to every single club, Jake Riccardi. Maybe a Brendan Cox as well, is some guy I've just mentioned countless times in this episode already as well. But yeah, Swans can really do anything in this offseason. Whatever they do, it's going to benefit their list. So it's a nice position to be in for them. The Eagles now, second last team we're going to be talking about. Their list is aging. We all know that. And it's just a matter of how they approach it. They can go down the point of getting a lot of kids in, rebuilding this list that doesn't obviously doesn't need a rebuild yet. They're in the top 8. But all these guys are sort of nearing the slight ends of their careers, or at least the time of their career where they're going to start to maybe backtrack a little bit. So maybe whether it's they want to get more kids in just to sort of make sure that they don't sort of hit a brick wall in a few years when these players start to go into retirement, or whether they just bring in a few more guys to continue their premiership window. What they do, I don't know. They can sort of go either way about it, a bit like the Swans. What they could probably focus on is bringing across a WA boy at Geelong that can't get a game. There's obviously a couple there in Jordan Clark and Quinton Narkle. They'd be very handy for them. Obviously, we've seen what's happened with West Coast midfield this year. Elliot Yeo and Luke Shuey are pretty injury prone, so getting a Quinton Narkle in would be quite handy for them. And a Jordan Clark off halfback would be handy too, with Shannon Hearn obviously nearing the end of his career. He looks about 100, but still obviously getting games. But yeah, at the end of the day, he's not going to be out there forever. So those two boys would probably be handy for the Eagles outfit at Optus Stadium, much like for Freo. So it will be an interesting battle at the end of the season, given both teams are probably going to go after them hard. So it will be interesting to see whether one will end up somewhere and one will end up at the other place, or both go to one, or neither. It's going to be awesome to see what happens there. And finally, onto the Dogs. So, yeah, look, they've been one of the surprise packers this year. Not so much as Melbourne, but they obviously have been huge. Second on the ladder, best midfield in the comp. The emergence of Bruce up forward in partnership with Aaron Norton has been huge. When Tim English goes down there, it's just a whole nother level. Maybe can just strengthen this defence a little bit. Maybe couple of lockdown defenders. Absolutely no idea who that would be. Maybe the likes of Ben Patton from the Saints, who's obviously he's an underrated lockdown defender, but can't really use the footy. Someone like a Braden Maynard. Not saying he's going to go there, but you never know if he wants to seek a premiership. Perfect fit for the Dogs. Given Pies don't really know where they're going to be going. If they do enter a premiership window in his career, it'll probably be near to the end of his. So if he wants to seek one a bit earlier, never know. Maybe the Dogs, that could be a shock move that happens. Braden Maynard to the Dogs. But apart from that, they don't really need too much attention to their list. The Dogs just about making sure Jamara doesn't leave, because that would make a few draftees nervous as they get drafted to the Dogs, because no matter how good you are, you could be on the chopping block after a year or two. But apart from that, the Dogs don't really need anything. It's just very similar to the Cats, worrying about September and the years to come. It's very handy. Their list is quite young, so this sort of strong period for them is going to be lasting a while. So the big question is whether they can just continue this, and this isn't just a one-season thing. Don't think it is. Obviously, they are very, very talented, and it was a bit silly having the likes of Bontempelli and Dunkley and all that running through their midfield, and they were only sort of just on the fringes of the 8 in the last couple of seasons. So it's very good to see them up the top of the table there. So maybe, just a sort of small lockdown defender. When I say small, just a lockdown defender would help them down back, not so much a key position player. But that concludes that segment. I've got on a lot longer than I thought it would. We're already over the hour mark, so sorry, Hamish, if you're going to be listening and editing this. We're going to move on to the Supercoach segment now. I've been talking the last few weeks. I've been planning for this inevitable round 14 bye that just occurred. Everyone was stuffed. Everyone had between 10 and sort of 16 players. I, on the other hand, there was a bit of luck as well. I didn't have Shai Bolton or Jaden Short. I didn't. Those two guys that everyone sort of seemed to have, or a Callum Mills. I shot up in the ranks. I finished with 1932. Which could have been a lot better. Now, my trades, I brought in Jared Lyons. I brought in Caleb Daniel. It's not a very common trade in, but I needed to bring in two guys, apart from Lyons, I need to bring in two guys that are about sort of 470 each. So I brought in, I made this call right up until the first bounce of the Geelong and Bulldogs game. And I went with Caleb Daniel over Jack Scrimshaw. It was down to both of those two. Caleb obviously just has a bit of a higher ceiling. So I went with him to finish off my defence, and I had to swing led into the midfield. And I went with Kyle Flipping Langford as my other pick, who just regretted it the second I did it. Should have gone Nick Hind or a Toby Green. That would have made my score, a 1990, or even 2000. That would have been phenomenal in this bye week. For the round, it's very, very annoying because I came 303rd for the round, but that is factoring in all of the look, let's call them dickheads, that make round 14 specific teams from the start of the season. So basically, if you're not familiar with that, what they do is, just they'll have their own separate team that they obviously do every week in round one, but they also have a separate account that they focus on one specific week in the buy, one of the buy specific weeks. So they'll only have premium players from the teams that are playing. So they just dominate the round because instead of struggling to fill 18 spots and having a few rookies on field, they have 18 premiums that are all playing. So I checked the live ranks at the end of the final game, and I was about 60th, 70th, so it was all right. I would have been about... Actually, no, hang on. I think I was Actually, I can't remember. I think I was about 60th or 70th, and I would have been top 10 if I'd gone for being Hind or Toby Grant. I didn't, obviously. In hindsight, worst move I've ever done, or second worst move I've done this season, behind bringing in Isaac Heaney. At the end of the day, obviously, went very well still. Came 303rd, shot up in the ranks from, I can't even remember what from, but I shot 2,313 spots all the way up to 1,249th. So whilst everyone sort of went down, I shot up and I'm now within the top 1,250. So I'm actually 10 spots ahead of Pilcher, who's obviously one of the boys on this potty. I've scored 4 points more than him, I think. So it's literally just one tackle. So it's going to be a nice little battle between him and I. Not sure if Hamish is going to come close, given he's, I think, battling to stay in the top 30K. But yeah, just a few sort of highlights from the weekend from my players. Jared Lyons, I loopholed him as soon as I brought him in. Very happy with his 141. I went with that. Didn't go Bontempelli, which would only cost me sort of 2 points. Lockie Whitfield, very nice to see him get a 120. We were all kind of waiting for it, the ones that brought him in. Daniel, very nice to get triple figures. Jordan Ridley as well was back with 111, was taking kickouts, which was very promising. Tom Stewart somehow only got 120. Tom Mitchell, another midfielder that probably many people brought in during the buys, given he had the round 12, got 114, which was very handy. A couple of rookies underperformed a little bit. Jai Newcomb only got a 24, which is a bit unfortunate. But anyway, it's as long as he just sort of stays on the bench, maybe gets games here and there. He's not really there to make cash now. It's just about playing and just being there if we need him. Hall and Z will combine for a 234. Just happens about every week now, which is very handy for the guys that have them, including myself. So this week, I wasn't doing trades up until now when we Java and Impy. I'm going to wait until tomorrow, but it sounds like he's going to be out for the rest of the season. So it's a very tricky spot because I've only got 10K in the bank and there's just no one I want around the 417K mark as a forward. So apart from like a Tim Membry or a Jake Stringer, who are both due to rise like 50K, but then it's just a matter of probably sideways trading them again once that happens. So that's just 2 trades there. So you may as well use the 2 trades to upgrade him. So I might actually bring in Nick Hine this week so I have him so I don't regret it. So I don't miss out on another 130, which will just kill me given I was about to bring him in. So I'm probably going to end up doing that. I'm at the moment projected 2,488, which is probably what everyone's projected at this point of the season. Always ends up being about 200 less than that. So don't get your hopes up if your projected is like 2,600. But yeah, that's going to be my Supercoach route. There's not too much now as we get into the home stretch of the season. It's just more about making sure that your team is full primo and that if you have any outs, you have bench cover or you have trades. Just got to remember to save those trades for finals because you'll be surprised at how many times you really wish you would save trades during the year. I'm not going to bother going through the team. I was going to go through the team matchups for this week, but we're already an hour and 8 minutes in. So I'm just going to sort of list them off as I go through my predictions for this week. So Brisbane, Geelong happening right now. It's halfway through the third quarter. Lions are up by 6 goals. So I actually tipped Geelong. Very smart move from me. So we'll see what happens there. It's very good to see the Lions hopefully get another win here. Looks like there's a bit in it as well. A few spot fires here and there. I think it's probably based around the Margaret Connor Lockie Neal situation, which is it's good for the game to see the best players go up against the best taggers. But anyway, so we've got Richmond, St Kilda tomorrow night. God help us all that are St Kilda supporters. Samson Ryan making his debut, which is very interesting. Given they haven't actually dropped Chol or Coleman Jones. So I think it's just going to be the Tigers there. It's just going to be too good for them. They have hit, not hit, sorry, but This season hasn't been as strong as previous seasons, but at the end of the day, this is just the typical Richmond. They drop a few games in the middle of the season, people start to doubt, and then they fire in September. What better team to come up against to regain a bit of form than St Kilda, eh? We do have Membry, Marshall, and Ross coming back. But at the end of the day, I think this is just going to be a Richmond walk in the park. It is at the G. I'm predicting this to be 6+ goals. Probably generous to St Kilda. Then on to Collingwood Fremantle, Saturday at 1:45. The Pies regain Brodie Grundy. Going to be an interesting game at Marvel, not the G. The Dockers also get Fife back, so a few big guns back for this one. Very tight contest. Probably going to go the Pies. Obviously hit a little bit of form the last few weeks. They are going to be missing to Goey, but at the end of the day, you bring in Grundy and Adams, take out to Goey. You're probably, you're not really worse off. Probably better off there. They obviously are missing Darcy Moore now as well. So when you factor him in, we'll see what happens. But it's probably the net result is probably even. So it's gonna be a very interesting game for that one. Freo aren't the strongest performers at Marvel. We obviously saw they were obviously lost heavily to Carlton early in the season, which doesn't usually happen too much. But yeah, I'm going to be going the Pies in this one. I think they've found a little bit of form. The likes of, probably Cox, who's just come in, and Darcy Cameron, I reckon, are going to kick about 4 or 5 together. And I reckon that's going to be enough to give them a winning margin. Then on to North Melbourne, Gold Coast. Blockbuster game, this one. 1:45 on a Saturday. This is at Blunston. This is honestly a flip of the coin, really. Just depends which Gold Coast shows up. If it's the talented one with the talented list they've got, they're going to be winning. But at the end of the day, I think North Melbourne are going to get the chocolates here. They're going to enter the double points in terms of playing points, I guess. Double figures in terms of playing points. Because they're currently on 6. Need 4 to get to 10, so I think they're going to get the 4 here. Just the one inclusion for them with Will Phillips. Tom Powell's going to miss his first game, unfortunately, but he's had a very good start to his career. I think North Melbourne are going to get the chocolates here, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens. It's going to be interesting to see which game everyone watches, whether they watch the close, but I don't know what way to describe it, not infamous, but funny game to watch in North Melbourne Gold Coast, or whether they go for the more generic Collingwood Freo. I'm going to be going for North in that one, though, in terms of tipping. Will be very interesting to see what happens, though. Port Adelaide, Sydney is the next one. Type of game that Sydney could upset, but I think Port at Adelaide Oval might just have them covered. They do gain Errol Goulden back, who, people... that probably doesn't seem like a massive inclusion, is actually leading for average goal assists in the competition in his first year. So that's huge for them. Dylan Williams making his debut for Port Adelaide. So that's huge for him as well. But I think Port, they're going to use the Adelaide crowd to their advantage here. I think they're going to get the chocolates, but you never know with the Swans. They've had a very promising year sitting in 6th. It is the type of game where they do upset. Buddy Franklin could come out and just put on an absolute show. So you never know. Will be a very good match, I think. Saturday night, Bombers D's, huge matchup this one, especially if Jake Stringer can continue how he played on the weekend. I'm sure he's going to be getting a big run in the guts there. But yeah, it's just another huge clash at the G. I think it's going to be close. I don't think the D's really had the look, every time I talk negatively about the D's, I feel a bit silly given how well they're going. But last time I did, it paid off because I said that the Crows might upset them, and they did. So I think this one's going to be close. I don't think the D's have the ability to blow out Essendon, because I think Essendon, they're a very sort of high-scoring, they're attacking team. They're not a conservative team. So I think Essendon are really going to test Melbourne's defence here. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup on Saturday night. Whether I see the game remains to be in question, given I'm going to be having a couple of drinks that night. Let's keep it at that. So we'll see what happens there, but I'm very intrigued to see what happens. That just did not make sense. Don't pay attention to that. Been speaking for an hour and 10 minutes now, so the words are starting to come out in other languages. We now move on to Sunday. GWS Hawthorn. Denver Granger Barras making his debut. The man that looks about 25 to 30. He's only 18. Going to be playing down back. Unfortunately, Jarman Impey, for everyone's super coach, is out. Maybe a season-ending injury. This one's an interesting one at the MCG, actually. GWS Hawthorn. It's a tough one to tip now that it's at the G. GWS aren't obviously the best travellers, especially when it comes to Melbourne. But obviously Hawthorn aren't one of the biggest teams of the competition. And yeah, it's whether GWS, this is going to be a test for them, whether they can travel or not. I know many people are just going to think, GWS, talented list, tip them. But Hawthorn are the type of team that will turn it up in a match where they know they can win. Clarkson is obviously the best coach in the competition, and he knows how to beat every single team. And I think he's going to put those skills on display on Sunday at 110, because I think Hawks are really going to give the Giants a run for their money. But I do think the Giants are going to get the chocolates. I think it'll be a close one down to the last quarter. Going to wait and see though. It's going to be huge, that one. I think many people are probably looking over it, but I think that'll be a very close contest. However, on to probably the match of the day. It'll be West Coast and the Dogs at Optus. That one is going to be huge. And that one is almost a flip of the coin as well. We know how strong the Eagles are at Optus, but the Dogs are obviously second on the ladder, one of the most informed teams in the competition. But the Eagles are regaining Tim Kelly, Luke Shuey, Brad Shepherd, McGovern. Huge. Very stiff to the likes of Luke Foley, who's been omitted, who had a very strong game against Richmond a couple of weeks ago, and Luke Edwards is on the extended bench. So those could be a couple of the stiffest exclusions in AFL history. But we'll wait and see what happens there. I'm actually going to be going the Eagles here. I think they're going to use Optus Stadium to their advantage. I think that forward line as well. We talked a bit. I think I touched upon last week that the experience of Geelong's attacking trio and Cameron Hawkins and Rowan will be the reason that they defeat the Dogs, because their attacking trio of attacking duo really of Bruce and Norton is more superior. Obviously, it came down to the last kick to prove that point, but at the end of the day, I think that'll also happen here with West Coast and the Bulldogs. Arguably, West Coast have the best forward line in the competition, but I'm actually going to be going the Eagles here, yeah. Regardless, I'm going to be captaining Bonton Supercoach, so we'll see what happens. And then lastly, this is an intriguing game. Carlton Adelaide. I'll tell you what, if the Blues drop this, prepare for all hell to break loose. I love this is on Sunday at 4:40, because all eyes will be on it, and I would love the Crows to come out and just get a really hard fought win and just kill them with pressure and speed and everything like that, because it'd be awesome to see Carlton have another gut-wrenching loss. I'm sorry for any Carlton supporters listening, but I love to see you guys lose. Given St Kilda are sort of on similar paths in terms of list and have been for the last sort of few years, so will be very interesting to see what happens there. I will be going for the Crows, but we'll be tipping Carlton probably. I think this will be the type of win that they're going to get. All the Carlton fans will be saying, it's fine. You know, I'm going to cancel the September holidays. I'm going to the grand final. We're going to be there. Whereas you've only just beaten Adelaide, but we'll wait and see what happens there. That's going to be an awesome game. I will be tipping Carlton, but if Adelaide win, I'll tell you what, it's going to be a great Sunday night, and it's going to be a great week after that to see what happens in the press with Carlton. However, I think that is just about going to sum up the recording. I've been talking about an hour and 15 minutes now, so you're probably sick of my voice if you've managed to stay on this long. If you have, well done. If you haven't, well, you're obviously not listening to this, so bugger off. But anyway, it's been awesome for Hamish to give me the privilege of hosting this episode. Not that he really had much of a choice. I pressured him into letting me take this opportunity, given he wasn't available. He was keen to just sort of give the potty a week off. I was like, no. I want to do this one. I want to see how I'm going to go solo. So apart from the sort of, remarks or sentences that might have come out Chinese, it was very cool to get this opportunity to talk just about footy and just talk absolute dribble. But yeah, hope you took a bit out of that sort of off-season segment. If you did, you can hopefully get an insight into how much I love that bit of the AFL. If you didn't, fair enough. You join the 99% of the population to sort of roll your eyes whenever I mention it. But yeah, awesome week of footy to come up. Awesome week of footy coming up. That's probably a reason why I should end this episode now, because I'm starting to speak absolute gibberish. As I speak, Charlie Cameron's taken by the looks of it, a very courageous mark, because he's just about knocked out Brad Close with a knee. But go to the third quarter there in the Brisbane-Geelong game about 4 minutes in. That's just what I've seen. That's a huge grab. So I'm just going to end it here now. We're at an hour and 19. Good luck to everyone in Supercoach and tipping and punting. I think we're all going to need it. But yeah, I will catch you guys probably next week. Cheers.